I wanted to compare two of the best versions of the Bond Seamaster, the 2220.80 and the current generation from 2018 Diver Seamaster 300 meter. Now these two watches I own and I love both of them for different reasons, but if you're considering buying a Bond Seamaster and you're specifically considering these two models, this video is for you because I'm going to go through step by step the differences between them and also my preference. So first, I want to point out this 2220.80. This is the first Bond Seamaster that I got. When I decided that I wanted a Bond Seamaster, I did the research and concluded this was my favorite version that they ever released. It has the original case profile and the aluminum bezel and overall design of the original, like the 2531.80. But it has the updated coaxial movement, the 2500 caliber, and they made some other upgrades to it that I really like. Number one, the Omega logo is applied, which in lighting like this actually looks really terrible, but in natural light reflects really, really well. They also made the applied hour markers, which I don't know what they're cased in, but they give some depth to the dial that the original painted hour markers lack. They also increased the size of the hands just a little bit, so they look a little bit more proportional on the dial. But otherwise, it maintained basically everything that made it great. Like I said, the design, the 15-minute timer on the bezel, the aluminum bezel, it's pretty much the same thickness. It's slightly thicker. The coaxial movement introduced maybe a 0.5 millimeter of thickness. So it's 13 millimeters thick. I believe the originals are 12.5. But on the wrist, I've worn the original Bond Seamaster for 10, 15 years, and I didn't even notice that it was thicker until I saw it on a spec sheet. And so in real life, it's not noticeable. The bracelet is, of course, extremely comfortable, soft, silky, and smooth, but when it gets beat up like this, it doesn't necessarily look the best. I personally think and have decided this is the, spoiler alert, the best version of the Bond Seamaster that they ever made. And I always tell anyone who's thinking they might get a Bond Seamaster, just get this one. This is the one to get, especially if you want the blue one. However, I was also attracted to this 2018 Seamaster 300M because ceramic and laser engraved wave dial and METOS certification and bold, uncompromising, go swing for the fences design. When Steve Jobs introduced Mac OS X in the year 2000, he said the buttons look so good, it looks like you can lick them. And that's kind of what came to mind whenever I wanted to buy this watch, because the ceramic is shiny. And in light like this, it has this really, saturated blue appearance. But, you take it outside and it can look sometimes black depending on the light. Direct light makes it look really beautiful and saturated in blue. But then in, more normal conditions inside or in the shade, it gets really dark. So it has this depth to it that is hard to capture except in each of those different lighting conditions. I'd say the biggest difference to me that I noticed once I bought this and started wearing it more, and you can identify these things in the boutique as well, is the difference in size. And even though on paper this is 42 and this is 41, you can just tell. I mean, it's bigger than it seems like on paper. For one, and I think a big reason for that is that the bezel on the modern Seamaster is a wider track, while the dial aperture is probably just about the same as the original. And the numerals, of course, are brighter with that white enamel, so they have a high contrast, so they call much more attention to themselves. So that's a big part of it. The other thing is that, like the lugs. So the lugs on this one, on the original 2220 Casino Royale, they taper down a lot more. And the lugs on this still taper down, but they're much thicker and wider. It's reminiscent of how when Rolex introduced the modern Submariner case, they call it the Maxi case, the lugs just got thicker. And some people like it, some people don't like it. I prefer the Seamaster Lyre lugs to the Rolex lugs. And so it's okay to me on this, but it just adds to the overall, feeling of it being bigger. The hour markers are bigger, the handset's kind of bigger and more pronounced. And so that's a big part of it. It just wears bigger. The other thing is the thickness. And like I mentioned, this one is 13 millimeters thick. The original Bond Seamasters are like 12 and a half. And this one on paper is only, I think it's 13.7, so it's only 0.7 millimeters thicker, which again, on paper, not that big a deal, but on the wrist, it's noticeable. And you can see from the side profile, that mid case is where a lot of that thickness got added. And the way that the bezel stands up above, which they made the bezel taller to accommodate how brittle ceramic is. So there's a functional reason for it, but it makes the whole case feel thicker. And let me throw these on the wrist separately and you can see how they wear. So throwing this first 2220 Seamaster on the wrist, the Casino Royale, you can see that I have a 7-inch wrist, maybe it's 6 3/4, I don't know, somewhere around there, somewhere between those two. And it wears pretty thin. You know, this dress shirt easily slides over. If I pull it up, it's not a big deal. And it doesn't wear too pronounced. It doesn't stand up off my wrist very, very much. And even though this bracelet doesn't taper, it's not that thick in terms of its thickness. And it honestly, it doesn't feel chunky at all, even though it doesn't taper. By comparison, we'll throw this one on the wrist. Everything about this is more pronounced. On the wrist, still fits the wrist. I don't think it's too big for this size wrist, but it just stands up off the wrist significantly more so than you would expect just based on the specs. And the bracelet, the links are longer and bigger and thicker and more pronounced. The clasp is this monster that has this thing that'll catch on your skin on both ends versus the very svelte clasp on the original that was silky smooth and felt almost completely integrated. And so it just has more wrist presence. Like it's literally, I mean, it's like what all watches have gone through in the last 30 years, where everything has gotten bigger, more bold, and you know, the concept of quote unquote wrist presence has come into vogue. Whether that's bad or good is kind of in the eye of the beholder. It also depends on how it wears on your wrist and what you think this watch will fulfill in your watch collection. I mean, on the one hand, they're the same watch, but on the other hand, the modern version feels like it gained some of the sports watch connotations that the Planet Ocean fulfilled. So let me just pull this from off of camera. I have the original generation 42 millimeter Planet Ocean 2201.50. This is the watch, and this is the watch that existed at the same time. I think they were both, this was released in 05, this was released in 06. Together, these two in a collection make sense side by side. This is the slightly more svelte, sporty, kind of do-it-all dive watch. James Bond wore it with a tuxedo and it looked great. I've worn it with a tuxedo and it feels natural. It's svelte, it's comfortable, but you know, it can go you could do, you know, anything you want. It can dive to 300 meters. Nobody's diving 300 meters. That's like literally not happening unless you're a professional in very specific circumstances. But it's thin enough to wear in almost any circumstance. This is the chunky dive watch that's got the sports connotations. It's thick. It goes to 600 meters, which is, again, it's a ridiculous depth. But it's got the classic bold Omega wedge-shaped hour markers and, you know, the Seamaster 300 vintage look that it's got going for it. With those, you know, double broad arrow hands. Everything about the Planet Ocean is a sporty watch. And in contrast, this has a lot more svelteness to it. You put this down, though, however, and you pull this out, which is also 42 millimeters. It's bigger and chunkier than this in some ways. And the thickness is much closer. It's closer in thickness to this than it is to the other one, 13.7, and this is 14.1, I believe, or something like that. But in terms of on the wrist, this is not a Planet Ocean video, but I'll throw this on the wrist. In terms of how it stands up off the wrist and how it wears, it stands up off the wrist. In some ways, it maybe even looks a little bit more lower profile than the modern Seamaster. And so these two together, this and this, make a little less sense because they overlap a little bit too much. Even though even though the modern Seamaster has half the water resistance, the case thickness is so much there, so much, so close to the planet ocean, and the overall dimensions and size and chunkiness means that it almost fulfills the role of the planet ocean itself, which begs the question, well, what fulfills the smaller Svelter dive watch position that this watch used to fill? And that's a great question. I don't know. Now, it sounds like I'm kind of bashing this, but I'm really not. Does it make sense for me to own both? That's a question that I have to answer for myself, but it's because of all these things that I almost feel like they're two different watches. This, to me, is the perfect all-around single watch collection, at least for me. If I had to sell all watches forever and always and just keep one, this would be the watch. That's the easiest decision I've ever had to make. It would be no big deal. This watch I appreciate for its modern technologies. I like the bolder wrist presence. There's something about this watch that feels just so awesome to wear when you are on vacation. Let's say you go to the beach. Let's say you're going and swimming in the pool. You're hanging out. You're drinking beers, and it's just sporty. You throw it on a rubber strap. You throw it on a NATO strap. It's just fantastic. So these two can complement each other in a collection like they have in mind for the time being. But if you're trying to decide between the two, and things like whether or not you can get one that's still in factory warranty or you can get one brand new, or not necessarily the most important things, then my vote all day long is this. If you care about all the rest of that, obviously, the only options are going to be ones that you can get new. But in terms of everyday wear and everything, this is my favorite, and it always will be. I will make another note about the bracelet. A lot of people have hated on this bracelet design. It's never bothered me, in part because it's so extremely comfortable. And I've seen this watch and I put it on other bracelets, and they always just look a little weird on this particular watch. On this watch, however, where they updated and rendered that same bracelet in just a more modern, chunky version, I have not liked it. A big part of that has to do with this end link here. I feel like the way that light reflects on this makes this look like a fat guy's chunky neck roll. I just think that is completely not elegant whatsoever. Whereas this has a much more elegant, because it's got the extended end links. I think that it's just significantly more elegant on this than it is on this. Look at that, it's a fat guy's neck roll. That's a big part of it. Aesthetically, it's just bothered me. The other thing is it's actually way less comfortable. I think it's something to do with it's like the sharper edges. It's not sharp, but they're just severe 90-degree angles. And again, like I said, I like to wear it somewhat loose. So as it slides up and down my wrist, it just hurts. The clasp is also more secure and chunkier, but this little piece sticks down into your wrist more. That just digs into your wrist compared to the original, which is decidedly, I'm sure, less secure or maybe less, this is some thin metal, maybe that breaks there. But that, I would have never even guessed that that's there if I didn't actually look at it. See, significantly lower profile. So as I've owned this, I've actually worn it almost 0% of the time on this bracelet, and I actually put it on a Forstner Contemporary Flat Link. You'll also notice this knockoff mesh bracelet, like the No Time to Die stainless steel. This is from a brand called Heimdallr, which makes a knockoff rep of the, it's not a rep, but it's just like a shameless ripoff of the Bond No Time to Die Seamaster. But they sell a stainless steel. It looks and works exactly like the one from Omega. And I bought this. It's $40 as a way to see if I would like it. And I think it looks really good on this. But my preference is on the Contemporary Flat Link bracelet, which I'll throw it on for you. But it also looks really good on NATO straps. I really like it on this NATO strap, and I've got some others. Let me throw it on this Contemporary Flat Link to show you what I'm talking about. Okay, so here's the watch on the Contemporary Flat Link. I think this watch on 3-link bracelets can sometimes look really weird. I think this watch, I've never seen it look good on a 3-link bracelet, in my opinion. Although this does fit the 8500 caliber Aquaterra bracelets, one of which I have, and that's the best I've seen it look. But this one, I think, actually looks just fine. And this is the contemporary flat link from Forstner, which the contemporary flat link has slightly longer links and slightly thicker links, more akin to modern bracelets, of course, as opposed to like those vintage ones that they make from, like, you know, that are meant to look like and feel like the old Speedmaster bracelets from the 60s. But on the wrist, I think this just has a much the way that it looks on the wrist, I think, is great, and it tapers down and it's comfortable. This is significantly more comfortable than the Omega one. So this is my favorite way to wear it. It also looks really good on that mesh, like I said, and it looks really good on rubber straps, and it looks really good on NATO straps. I actually like this on straps way more than the Casino Royale. I think it takes to other straps, especially NATO straps and rubber straps, much more than this, in my opinion. So there's my comparison. Which watch is for you? That is the question. That is the question we all have to answer. For me, if I had to pick just one watch, like I said, I'm biased, and this is the one, the Casino Royale for me. Yet there's a lot to love about the new one as well. So it just depends on your personal taste. But hopefully this video has been helpful. If you have also been looking for that perfect specimen of the blue Seamaster Professional 300 meter, and a bonus. So there's a 2220.80 on the left, and on the right, the modern Bond, the modern Seamaster 300M. Obviously, the use of blue lume is very attractive. The green minutes hand, in my experience, after about 20 minutes, my eyes are not able to detect the difference in color between the blue and the green. That difference disappears, at least in my eyes. This is a newer watch, and so the lume is better. This watch coming up on 20 years old, and here in a couple of years, I feel like whenever I send it in for a service, I'll see if they'll, I'm kind of hoping that they replace the dial with brighter lume plots and so forth. But both of them very legible at night. I sleep with my watches on, and either of these, I'll lume it up with a UV light and go to bed and be able to tell the time, no problem, all night long. So there it is, the lume between the Seamaster 300M 2220.80 and the modern 2018 model of the Seamaster 300M Professional Diver. Bonus lume. Planet Ocean. Extra bonus lume. Speedy 3861.